Gnome blessings, fellow Gnomians. I was a bit late today in getting this episode made, so I'm trying something new. No fancy camera setup or editing, just my phone, my dog, the grandpa of the church, Phantom, chilling in the living room. So, we just passed the summer solstice on Friday, which is the longest day of the year. Whether or not you sat with the sun or marked the moment, I hope you felt even a little bit of what this time can offer. A reminder that light can stretch longer than we thought, that growth happens quietly until suddenly. It's everywhere, that we can hold warmth, stillness, and momentum all at once. And I've been thinking about that as we step into today's episode because forgiveness and reconciliation are a lot like the solstice. They're not always loud or easy, but they do stretch us. They ask us to make peace with the shadow while still reaching for the light. So today's episode is about what it means to forgive, not in a way that makes you feel small or dismisses your pain, but in a way that helps you come back to your center. We'll talk about letting go of resentment without letting go of, well, your boundaries. We're going to talk about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation because one is for your own peace and the other, it has to be mutual. Talk about what it means to live in a world where everything that we do can be recorded, can be replayed, and frozen in time, and why that makes both accountability and compassion more important than ever. But before we get into all of that, I do want to take a moment and share some pretty cool updates about the Church of Gnome because, like usual, a whole lot has been happening lately, and it's always wild in the best way. So, first of all, we've now had about 15,000 people join in just the last 3 months, and we've expanded to 45 countries, and that alone blows my mind. So, here in the US, here's the top 10 states with the most members in this order: Texas, California, Pennsylvania, Washington, Ohio, New York, Florida, Michigan, Illinois, and North Carolina. So, yes, Washington, where we're based, is number 4, and I didn't expect that. And as for how people are finding us, no surprise that the majority comes through Facebook, where I've been running ads and sharing content for a while now. But what really excites me is that the second most common way people join is through word of mouth. And that's huge. More and more, I'm hearing stories of people encountering the church through you. Just the other day, my wife was getting a tattoo, and the artist started talking about how she keeps hearing about the Church of Nome and now is seeing it show up everywhere online. That very same day, my cousin sent me a text that he was wearing his Church of Gnome sweatshirt at a brewery, and the bartender started talking to him about it. And a couple weeks ago, that same cousin of mine went to Idaho to visit some friends that are going to be getting married. And the guy who is officiating was talking to him, telling him how stoked he was that he just got ordained through the Church of Nome. And then my cousin called me and I talked to them all. It was pretty awesome. So we are everywhere. And that's incredible. Something really awesome is happening here. And based on some of the social media analytics, it's safe to say that at this point, millions of people have at least heard of the Church of Nome, and more people are joining after finding those missionary gnomes that so many of you have been placing out in the world for others to find and giving out to strangers who maybe needed a little bit of magic that day. So this isn't just growing, it's spreading in a best and a super organic way. So thank you all. Every share, every conversation, every gnome you've passed on to a stranger, you're helping to build something sacred here. So now, let's get into today's episode. Let's talk about forgiveness, reconciliation, and what it means to reclaim peace without losing yourself along the way. So let's start by saying something that maybe doesn't get said enough. Forgiveness is not the same thing as approval. It's not the same thing as forgetting. And it's definitely not about pretending something didn't hurt just to keep the peace. Forgiveness, real soul level forgiveness, is not about the other person necessarily. It's about you. It's about letting go of something that's weighing down your spirit. Not because it didn't matter, but because it matters too much to carry forever. So, to release another from the chains of the past is to unburden your own heart and set both souls free. I'm not saying to let them off the hook or, you don't need to pretend it didn't happen. I'm saying unburden your own heart because resentment is heavy, anger is heavy, replaying the hurt in your mind over and over, waiting for someone to fix it, to apologize the right way, to become someone that they might not be. That's a lot to carry. And you don't have to carry that forever. But also, I do want to be very clear that forgiveness is not required. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to offer grace to people who maybe haven't earned your trust. You don't have to reconcile. You don't even have to speak to them again. So, what we're talking about today isn't some one size fits all idea of forgiveness. It's not forgive and forget. It's more like forgive so you can remember who you are again without the weight of what they did. Because holding on to bitterness, it doesn't really protect us. It just keeps us connected to something painful longer than what we need to be holding on to it for. So I want to invite you to consider this, is there something or someone that you're still carrying, not because you want to, but because it's become part of how you protect yourself? And if you were to set it down, not excuse it, not erase it, just set it down, what would you gain? What would soften? What would open up in you again? Forgiveness isn't a weakness. It's not about making yourself small. It's about choosing to be free and to free your energy from something that's already taken enough from you. That's the kind of forgiveness that I'm talking about here in the Church of Gnome. The kind that honors your well being, your boundaries, your truth, while still making space for healing if and when it feels right. So if the idea of forgiveness makes you tense up or roll your eyes and want to skip this episode altogether, I get it. You're not wrong for feeling that way, and you're not alone in it. But I want to offer you is that, maybe there is a different way to hold this idea, not as pressure, but as possibility, because we're living in a time where more people are being held accountable than ever before. And in many ways, that's good, that's necessary, that's part of how real change happens. For too long, harm could be hidden, pain was silenced, people in power did whatever they wanted, and those who were hurt by them were expected to quietly carry the weight. So, this cultural shift we're in, it matters, but even something important can come with new complexity because now almost everything is recorded, screenshotted, shared, frozen in time. A single moment, a bad day, a poor decision, a harsh comment, a lapse in judgment can follow someone for years, long after they've already grown, long after they've changed, if they've changed. And that's the hard part, isn't it? What do we do when we know someone did harm, but we also believe people are more than the worst thing they've done? There's a tension here. It's a sacred one. And we need to hold both truths at once. Accountability is essential, but compassion is too. So we don't excuse harm, we don't rush to forgive just to feel better, and we definitely don't ignore the impact of someone's choices. But we also don't want to build a world where no one is allowed to change, where the door to healing is shut before, someone's even been able to reach for it. Because if we believe people are incapable of becoming more than their worst moment, what are we really saying about the human spirit? What are we saying about ourselves? Forgiveness, it doesn't erase the past, it simply refuses to chain someone to it forever. And let's be honest, most of us are not the same person we were 5 years ago or even last year. No, I'm sure we've all said some things that we regret. We've reacted from fear. We've been under pressure and behaved in ways that weren't really true to who we really are. Sometimes we were held accountable. Sometimes we just learned. But in that space between who we were and were becoming, what we most needed was probably grace. Not necessarily a free pass, not just to be excused, but to be seen as still capable of becoming more. This is what the Gnomean path is making room for. Not performative forgiveness, not empty apologies, but real growth, real change, real humanity. So maybe the question isn't, should I forgive them? Maybe the question is this a person who's trying to become better? And can I hold that without letting go of what I need to feel safe? Because we don't forgive people to forget what happened. We forgive, sometimes quietly, sometimes just within ourselves, because we know what it's like to want another chance at being who we really are. So let's take a moment to talk about something that can get emotionally complicated for a lot of people. What happens after you forgive someone? Does it mean things have to go back to the way they were? Does it mean you're expected to reach out, to reconnect, to rebuild? Sometimes the answer could be yes, and sometimes it's not. Forgiveness and reconciliation are often mentioned in the same breath, but they're not the same thing. Forgiveness is your process, internal, deeply personal. Reconciliation, on the other hand, I look at that as a shared experience. It only works when both people are willing to show up honestly, take responsibility, and create something new together. There are times when reconciliation is possible, and when it is, and when it's real, it can be beautiful. Reconnecting with someone after a long silence or a season of hurt, and slowly rebuilding something rooted in mutual care and understanding, that can bring healing to both people. It can be redemptive, it can be hopeful. That's not always the story, and it doesn't have to be. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself or for someone else is to, bless them quietly and keep your distance. Not out of bitterness, but from clarity, not from anger, but from peace. You can forgive someone and still know in your heart that closeness, it's no longer safe, healthy, or aligned with who you are now. So that doesn't mean your forgiveness is incomplete. It means you're listening to your wisdom. In the Church of Nome, we hold forgiveness as sacred, but never at the expense of your own integrity. You're not expected to reopen doors that took everything in you to close, and you're certainly not asked to invite someone back into your life if your heart is still telling you it's not time, or maybe it never will be. At the same time, we also want to leave room for possibility. Sometimes reconciliation is delayed, not denied. Sometimes, with time, healing, and accountability, people do change. Sometimes they come back differently. And if it ever feels right, if it ever feels safe, if something in you is open to that conversation again, you're allowed to walk back toward that person slowly and with care. The key is it has to be your choice, not from pressure, not from guilt, but from something honest within you. So, is there someone you've kept away, out of protection? And is that protection still needed? Or is there someone you've been holding close out of habit or fear when maybe the most loving thing would be to release them with peace? These are hard questions and there's no one size fits all answer, only your own intuition, your story, and your healing. So, reconnection, it can be a gift when it's mutual, and so can distance when it's grounded in care, not resentment. So, whatever choice you make, it's okay. You're not less spiritual for creating boundaries, and you're not naive for hoping reconciliation might one day be possible. There's wisdom in both paths, and there is healing and honoring what's true for you. So, forgiveness can be a complicated world depending on your story. It might bring up a lot of grief, resistance, even anger. And I want to honor that because many people have been told that forgiveness is a requirement, that if they don't forgive, they're holding a grudge, or that they're spiritually stuck, or that they're, not doing the work. But real forgiveness, the kind that frees you, not burdens you, it's never forced. It doesn't come from guilt. It doesn't come from performance. And it definitely doesn't come from trying to meet someone else's expectations. It comes from you, from the quiet moment when you realize that, no, I don't want to carry this anymore. That's why forgiveness still matters. Not because it erases what happened, not because it lets someone off the hook, but because it untethers your heart from a story that just keeps wounding you. Forgiveness is about choosing peace over prolonged suffering. It's about taking your power back, not by confronting the person who hurt you, but by releasing the grip their actions have on your own inner world. It's about clearing the space that resentment filled so something softer can grow there instead. And that softness, it isn't weakness, it's a kind of courage, a kind that doesn't need recognition, a kind that says, I choose to reclaim my spirit, not for them, but for me. So there's a Gnomean way of thinking about this, something I've often pictured as, emotional composting. Maybe not the prettiest, but, you take the leftover pain, the bitterness, the hard things that no longer serve you, letting them break down, not instantly, but slowly with time, with warmth, breath, until eventually they become the soil from which new things can grow. So forgiveness doesn't mean you'll never feel the hurt again, but it does mean the hurt doesn't get to be in charge anymore. You can remember what happened and still choose to live beyond it. You can carry the wisdom without carrying the wound. So, what story have you been looping in your heart that no longer needs to define you? What weight have you been carrying that you're finally ready to just set down? Not because it doesn't matter, but because you do. Forgiveness matters not because the past didn't hurt, but because you're worthy of a future that feels lighter. And wherever you are in that process, whether you're just beginning to consider it or you've been working toward it for years, you're not behind, you're just human. And the sacred work of letting go can take a lifetime. But every step you take in that direction is a step back to yourself. So, if there's one thing I hope you take from this episode, it's that forgiveness doesn't have to feel like surrender. It doesn't have to mean excusing what happened or inviting pain back in, and it doesn't have to come quickly. Real forgiveness, the kind that lightens your heart and doesn't cost your dignity. It can take time, it can take self trust, and it takes a kind of inner courage that no one else may ever see. Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're still carrying something heavy. Maybe you're just hearing the word forgiveness and it stirs up all sorts of resistance more than it stirs up relief. And that's okay. This isn't a test, it's a path and you get to walk it at your own pace. In the Church of Gnome, we believe that peace should never come at the cost of your personal well being. That forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, it's about freeing yourself from being defined by it. And that reconciliation, when it happens, should be something that lifts both people, not something that asks you to lower yourself just to keep the peace. You're allowed to move forward without going back. You're allowed to set boundaries and still have a soft heart. You're allowed to forgive and still feel the weight of what was lost. You're allowed to release someone and never reconnect. And if someday your heart opens to reconciliation, may it be mutual, healthy, and grounded in truth, whatever that looks like for you. So I hope you feel this, that you don't have to carry what no longer belongs to you. You don't have to stay bound to the harm someone else caused, and you don't have to harden yourself just to survive the memory of what happened. Forgiveness in the Gnomean tradition is never about diminishing your worth, it's about returning to it. So here's a final blessing from my heart to yours. May forgiveness lighten your heart, may reconciliation strengthen your spirit, and may wisdom guide you to peace without compromise of your well being. So, gnome blessings, everyone. Until next time.